Welcome to an introduction to the BU I2B2 Health Outcome Monitoring and Evaluation, or home cell. The goal of this presentation is to introduce users to the home cell by demonstrating a simple home cell query. In this example, the video will show how to assess obesity rates among primary care patients by race for the period 2005 to 2015 by demonstrating first how to create a base query, then how to build the numerator and denominator using constraints, then how to set up strata by race, and finally how to define the reference periods and intervals. In this example, we first need to set up a base query. A base query is designed to be a traditional I2B2 query cell query that includes all possible individuals who might be included in a denominator for any of the queries that are being run. The idea here is to choose a subpopulation within I2B2 to speed up the query cell. For this example, we're saying create a base query that includes all patients who have ever had at least one visit to family medicine or general medicine or geriatrics. We want to do a number of patients query because we really just want to set up the parameter. So we pull over the three facts for primary care services, click Run Query, and we get a total of over 329,000 individuals who have ever had at least one of these services within the system. With that base query, then we can then create a simple home cell query by initially dragging and dropping over the base query population and then adding a series of constraints. For this example, we're going to use an age constraint to specify that patients had to have had a visit to one of these primary locations at a certain age, by specifying an age of greater than 18 years and pulling over each of the services one by one again, and constraining that fact to the reference interval. We'll describe reference intervals later, but that basically means that the service had to occur in the year of interest for each of the years that we're looking at. We do the same for geriatrics, for general medicine, and the same for family medicine. And very quickly, we're able to describe a denominator panel whereby all the patients each year will have had at least one visit to one of these places. Vertical entries into a group are considered in OR relationships, and side-by-side comparisons that are in different groups are considered AND relationships. So what we're building here is a denominator constraint that includes only patients who had at least one visit to a primary care setting when they were 18 years or older, and who during that year also had at least one BMI measured. The numerator constraint is much simpler. It's really just a value-based constraint where we can then say, among all the people who fit the denominator criteria, how many actually had a BMI greater than 30. Again, the relationship is described as independent because it's not in relationship to anything else, and the value has to have been recorded during the reference interval. In this case, will be a year. We can then use subpopulations, defined also as I2B2 query cell queries, to stratify the data. In this example, we've pre-configured simple query cell constraints to identify all patients of certain races. Using these predefined query cell queries, we can drag them over and create strata, so that when it comes time to specify the reference interval, which in this case will be year, and a date range, a beginning date range and an end date range, and then giving the query a label that will help us remember what we're trying to measure in this query, and in this case it's obesity rates by race, and clicking execute, we send those parameters to the database for processing. The query can sometimes take a short time and sometimes a long time, depending on the complexity of the query. In this case, we've sped it up substantially, and what you can see is a data grid is delivered whereby each strata, number, and by the reference interval, which is year, has a numerator and denominator value, a proportion, which divides the numerator by the denominator, and the ability to graph these results to quickly see the substantial disparities between the groups with the highest proportion of obesity and the lowest proportion by race. So in this presentation, we've tried to introduce users to the home cell by demonstrating a very simple home cell query. And I hope in watching this, you've been able to see that we can measure obesity rates among primary care patients during a certain time interval by first creating a base query, then defining numerator and denominator queries, and finally stratifying by race, and ultimately generating a rich data table that's easily graphable and exportable.